Lane Kiffin denies Ole Miss issued an ultimatum. So what should we believe? We're talking about it. Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the app today. A ton to get into in this episode in the next edition of As the Lane Kiffin Coaching Carousel Turns. When last we spoke, and shout out to our everydayers if you've been following along. If you haven't, my goodness, please go back and listen to our previous episodes so you can keep up with how all of the Lane Kiffin saga is unfolding. I'll do my best to make sure that I can bridge it. Almost like the sequel to a movie. You want it to be a standalone. You know what I mean? You don't have to have seen the first one to get the second one, but the second one's better if you've seen the first one, sort of thing. So there was a report from Stuart Mandel over at The Athletic on Monday night that Ole Miss had issued an ultimatum to Lane Kiffin and put a deadline on it of November the 28th, the Egg Bowl. In our previous episode, what I told you is the conversations I had Monday evening with multiple sources familiar with Ole Miss's situation is that there wasn't actually an ultimatum. Now, this may be an issue of semantics or just arguing about verbiage. And the feeling was also that the date, November 28th, which is Black Friday, the day of the Egg Bowl, that was probably not accurate as well. Now, Stuart Mandel's a good reporter. And I think he's sort of tap dancing around the truth. I don't know that he's quite stamping on it. And so Lane Kiffin on Tuesday, hours after that report comes out on Monday night, is a guest on the Pat McAfee show. And Pat McAfee, who, keep in mind, Pat McAfee is not a hard-hitting journalist. That's okay. It's not a knock at all. It's just not what he does. McAfee is a guy that is there to be an entertainer and an opinion maker. He's not going to ask really tough questions and follow up. Like in this interview on the McAfee show, there was no point where McAfee asked about either Florida or LSU interest, which, my goodness, the news cycle was rampant on Monday with reports. I mean, we broke the story on my radio show and on LouisianaSports.net that Layla Kiffin was in Baton Rouge. And he never asked the question about your ex-wife visiting Baton Rouge. I mean, it's a very obvious question. But he asked about the ultimatum. And here's what Kiffin said.
That's absolutely not true. There's been no ultimatum, anything like that at all. And so I don't know where that came from, like a lot of stuff that comes out there. Like I said, man, we're having a blast. I love it here. I mean, our running back's sitting right over here. Oh, yeah. It just couldn't be better. Like I said, you pray for things. Our fans prayed for this type of thing, and now we're in the middle of it. So enjoy it. You're 10-1. You're getting ready. You got a bye week. You get to watch half the country lose, and there's no way we can lose Saturday. And then you play the Egg Bowl and go dominate that and keep that Egg Bowl trophy home where it's been for a long time.
One of the things that I said a lot in the past few weeks when Governor Jeff Landry gave that press conference, the initial press conference that caused the firestorm about Scott Woodward, and then subsequently went on McAfee and on my radio show. One of the things I said when LSU's newly elected president, Dr. Roos, had his misstep after Verge Osbury was promoted to the permanent athletic director, and then he called him the acting athletic director. And you know how that whole thing went. One of the pieces of advice that I gave, well, not that they were asking me for my advice, but although I did speak to people, I spoke to the governor and people in Dr. Roos's office. One of the pieces of advice that I gave was stop talking. Stop talking. Because the news cycle is such that we have this feeling like we got to go fix it when there's something bad. And so by talk, we can explain it by talking and fix it. And the reality is, all you do when you talk and try to fix it is you keep extending the life cycle in the news cycle of that story. Where if you just stop talking, people are going to move on to something else. For example, the two things I just mentioned. Ever since Governor Landry has stopped talking, nobody's talking about that anymore. Ever since LSU President Wade Roos stopped talking, nobody's talking about it anymore. The news cycle goes on. It finds new things to talk about. Now, Lane Kiffin is dominating the news cycle. And it would greatly behoove Lane Kiffin to stop talking. He went on the McAfee show thinking he was doing damage control from the ultimatum comment. All he did was bring new life to it because he denies an ultimatum happened, but then he starts with this whole, hey, Ole Miss fans, this is what you dreamed of, just enjoy it. They can't enjoy it. They would love to enjoy it. But the only thing singular is one thing. There is one singular thing that Ole Miss fans want to hear from Lane Kiffin. One thing. That's it. Nothing else. One thing. And you know what it is. The one singular thing that Ole Miss fans collectively want to hear from Lane Kiffin is, I'm not leaving Ole Miss. I'm staying at Ole Miss. That's it. That's all they want to hear. And he can't say the one thing they want to hear. So everything else he says is noise. It's white noise that's just going to be criticized. And he went on in this interview with McAfee, and he tried to make it better.
I know that, Coach. I've said when they're like, hey, all this stuff, and they're like, are you focused on other places? I said, no, I'm focused on winning because now what I've learned in college football, we have our little group chat with like Sark and Kirby and a couple guys, and we came up with this. You lose one, you're out of the top 10. You lose two, you're out of the top 25. You lose three, you get fired. So, you know, we're focused on our job of trying to get to 1-0 every week because that's the profession we're in now.
That's not helping. Neither is this.
I've been fortunate to be part of some really great runs in college football. You know, being at USC with Coach Carroll, and we won 34 straight, and then Coach Saban, our last 26 straight there, I think we won. So, and I remind these guys as they're in these runs and these great things, and now here are 3 straight 10-win seasons. Enjoy it. Have fun. You know, so often everybody's so serious, everybody's in it, and then they get out of it, and they're like, man, remember those old days. Remember how great they were. So I remind them, hey, those good old days, you're in them right now. Someday, 10, 20 years from now, you're going to be saying, man, remember that run we had at Ole Miss, and we had that Division II quarterback that would make all those plays, and the running back was leading the country in touchdowns, and there was a dog running around on the field, and the players were dunking. I said, you're in the good old days right now, so just have fun, enjoy it, and I think if you watch our team, you see them doing that.
The good old days that they can enjoy because they know the good old days are very likely going to end prematurely because their coach doesn't love them as much, as they love him. I believe this much at this point. I believe Lane Kiffin wants to leave Ole Miss. I believe at this point, LSU has overtaken Florida. I think as the season was going along, it was very obvious that Billy Napier was going to get fired. Florida was interested in Ole Miss. Florida was interested in Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin reciprocated. They were quietly moving about. And then a very unexpected thing happened. Brian Kelly got fired. And then Ole Miss and LSU entered the fray for Lane Kiffin. And then LSU got very serious and made him their top target and gave him a lot to think about. And now I believe that the way this has transpired with Layla Kiffin visiting Baton Rouge on Monday, the professional relationships and people in the profession that Lane Kiffin leans on, like Jimmy Sexton, Nick Saban. By the way, Lane Kiffin, represented by Jimmy Sexton of CAA. Pat McAfee, represented by CAA. Why do you think Lane Kiffin was on Pat McAfee's show? I keep trying to spell this out for you about the influence agents have for their clients. Yes, LSU has overtaken Florida. I think Lane Kiffin wants desperately to coach his team in the playoff. Ole Miss is not going to allow it. It's going to be fascinating. I don't believe that ultimatum is for Friday of the Egg Bowl. There's a lot of scuttle right now that after Ole Miss finishes practice on Thursday of this week, they're off Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that at some point in that window, likely Friday, Lane Kiffin and Keith Carter are going to meet, and there's going to be some finality. I don't know if we learn of that finality until after the Egg Bowl, but the reality right now from everyone involved in these conversations is Ole Miss very much realizes that if they are going to see their coach walk out the door, then they need to be involved in this coaching hiring cycle now. James Franklin just accepted the Virginia Tech job. There's 2 weeks left in the regular season. It used to be that you'd wait until the end of the regular season, you'd fire coaches, and then over the next couple of weeks, you'd hire somebody. James Franklin has already been fired and hired before the end of this season. So if Ole Miss is going to be looking for a new coach, let's say hypothetically it's Jon Sumrall at Tulane, all of the talk is about Jon Sumrall going to Auburn. Well, if Ole Miss is interested in Jon Sumrall, they need an answer from Lane Kiffin now so they can get in on Jon Sumrall before he signs with Auburn. It's so hard to imagine this lasting to and through the Egg Bowl. I think we've got to have some resolution on the Lane Kiffin situation at Ole Miss before Ole Miss starts Egg Bowl game plan week. I got much more on Kiffin. And by the way, I just mentioned James Franklin. Fascinating for what this means for Brian Kelly's buyout. We'll get to that as we continue. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Today's show is also brought to you by Our Lady of the Lake, championship health partner of LSU Athletics. You can always learn more at ololrmc.com/LSU. Our Lady of the Lake and LSU together, we roar. We are smack dab still in the middle of football season, and we're steamrolling toward a resolution on the LSU coaching search, but both the men's and women's basketball Tigers are on the hardwood, and so many great NIL deals with the basketball teams. Flau'jae Johnson, Michaela Williams, Robert Miller III, DJ Thomas Jr., all great Our Lady of the Lake athletes, not only LSU athletes, but LSU athletes that trust their care and their training with Our Lady of the Lake, the championship health partner of LSU Athletics. So if you're a world-class athlete or if you're an everyday champion like you and me and you need world-class health care, you need Our Lady of the Lake. You can learn more about the many different ways that they offer access and convenience at Our Lady of the Lake at the website ololrmc.com/LSU, ololrmc.com/LSU. Our Lady of the Lake and LSU. Together, we roar. So, James Franklin, who I just mentioned, has agreed to be the next head coach at Virginia Tech. And this is relevant not only for the timing, as we were just talking about, but also because of the money. Remember, James Franklin was owed a $49 million buyout by Penn State. Penn State owes James Franklin $49 million. Well, he had mitigation. in his contract. If he gets a new job, his contract is offset by that new contract. His buyout is offset by that new contract. So word comes out, and we do not yet know the terms of the Virginia Tech deal. What we know is that Penn State and James Franklin have settled his $49 million buyout for $9 million. Effectively, Penn State, because James Franklin is getting a new job, just saved $40 million on his buyout. So you're going to say, but Matt, that means LSU should not settle with Brian Kelly yet. Wait till he gets a new job, and then he's pressured into settling. You get him for way lower number. Sure. That could happen. But here's why it is so paramount to reach an agreement to settle a contract and settle this buyout dispute. Because if you're James Franklin, you just walked away from $40 million. Penn State saved a bunch. And it could have flipped. I want to remind you, when LSU fired Les Miles, he was being paid for 2 years while he was out of coaching. And then he was going to be hired by the University of Kansas to be their head coach. At the time Les was hired by Kansas, he still had $6 million left on his buyout. Les and LSU settled for $1.6 million. So Les walked away from $4.5 million to coach again at Kansas. Also, the other part of that, Ed Ogeron. Ed Ogeron was owed a $17 million buyout. Never settled. And LSU ended up paying the entirety of that buyout because Ed hasn't coached since he was fired by LSU. So you could be sitting there today saying, why should LSU or why should LSU settle? Wait for Brian Kelly to get another job, and then that number is going to go way, 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 way down. Remember, we told you these terms where LSU offered 25. The Advocate reported that. We reported at LouisianaSports.net that Kelly countered with an offer of $43 million. LSU then countered with $30 million. So they're far apart on that number. And you could say, well, wait for him to get a job, and that 30 could go down to 9, like James Franklin's number. Could. Or Brian Kelly could never coach again. You could end up paying him 54. It's just a risk. And there are benefits to both sides, as we've seen. When it comes to Ed Ogeron, LSU paid the entire thing. When it went to Les Miles or James Franklin, they wanted to coach again. It ended up being negotiated down. LSU, Brian Kelly would both in the Penn State instance, James Franklin ends up leaving $40 million on the table because he wants to coach again. He could just sit back and collect the whole thing. So where is Brian Kelly in this mix? I don't know. Kind of depends if he actually wants to coach again, how much his contract, his buyout would be mitigated. But LSU not knowing the answer to that is evidence why you should settle. Why you should find an opportunity to settle for that lower number now so you don't end up paying $54 million over 6 years. We'll see how it all transpires. That, of course, will be money that LSU wouldn't have to spend on Brian Kelly's buyout that they could spend on a new coach or the new staff or however it may be. And ultimately, we're waiting on who that is. Now, we know Lane Kiffin is the target. The big question that everybody has asked me is, if it's not Kiffin, who's next? I do have some thoughts on that I'd like to share with you as we wrap up. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. what you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time, just a couple of taps. I saw amazing deals talking about your favorite college football games as low as $25. Honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way that I bought tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. We have gone through plenty of responses from coaches asked about their interest potentially in other jobs. And I'm fond of saying there are three different applies. There's a denial, there's a non-denial denial, and a non-denial. The denial is Dan Lanning when he was on the Rich Eisen show. You remember this?
I'm not leaving Oregon. Yeah, as long as I win. That's what I always tell my kids. Yeah. Right. If your dad wins, we'll be at Oregon. So I gotta win. Right. That's how it changes.
So that's a denial. Dan Lanning definitively saying, I'm not leaving Oregon. Denial. Nick Saban saying, I'm not going to be the Alabama coach. Denial. Now he was the Alabama coach, as we all know, so denials aren't always effective. There's the non-denial, which is very rare. The non-denial is when a coach doesn't deny interest. They're open to interest in other jobs. And then there's the very common non-denial denial, where a coach is asked a very direct question and they refuse to answer the very direct question. They spin circles. And that is exactly what Eli Drinkwitz did when he was asked if he was interested in other jobs. Give a listen.
I'm not going to comment on message board chatters, tweets, sources. I've maintained with you and our team that my complete focus is on the task at hand. Last week, people were tired of me because I couldn't win the big game. People had me meeting with my team and telling them that I was going to another school, none of which were true. All of this stuff is just a distraction. I would like to remind everybody, including our fans, we absolutely love Mizzou. We love what we're building. We've been to 6 straight bowl games. We've got the sellout streak going. Our administration has been nothing but phenomenal to me. Since I've been here, I've signed multiple extensions. In fact, I signed one this past summer. So my focus is going to remain on our team and our current situation.
Okay. That is what we would call a non-denial denial. That is someone saying nothing direct. It would be very easy for Eli Drinkwitz to say, I'm not leaving Missouri. Instead, he talked about how much he loves Missouri, how much his family loves Mizzou, loves what they're building there, but doesn't say the one thing you want to hear, which is, yeah, I'm not leaving. Dan Lanning gave you the answer. Yeah, I'm not leaving. Well, what's interesting is I've been asked over and over and over and over and over and over again what LSU would do if they don't land Lane Kiffin. And I have not had a great answer to that question because I think LSU has done an exceptional job of being tight-lipped. And there's an old saying, loose lips sink ships. I'll remind you what happened 4 years ago. All of the talk was about Lincoln Riley. And ultimately what it came down to was that Lincoln, and no school ever just has one candidate. Lincoln Riley was choosing between LSU and Southern Cal. And the interest from both was sincere and real. And ultimately he picked Southern Cal. And what happened within 24 hours? Brian Kelly's introduced as the LSU head coach. They weren't down to just one option. So while Lane Kiffin is undoubtedly LSU's top target, they want him. They will pay for him. His wife was in town on Monday, touring the city. That is the target. But there's a real possibility that Lane Kiffin stays in Oxford. There's a real possibility that Lane Kiffin picks Ole Miss or picks Florida. He doesn't end up the LSU coach in the same way that Lincoln Riley picks Southern Cal. That happens. You miss. It's part of it. You can't make someone pick your job. All you can do is put forth your best foot and your best pitch and see what happens. Well, Eli Drinkwitz is one name that I have heard from a person involved in LSU search. It's the only name that I have had someone definitively tell me is on the list. But what was interesting was as Tuesday went along, Jon Sumrall, Kenny Dillingham, and Blake Baker were also names revealed to me as potential targets if LSU misses on Lane Kiffin. Now, Sumrall's fascinating. He's right down the road, and I would love that hire. But Sumrall is also very much in play at Auburn and seemingly in play at Ole Miss if Lane Kiffin leaves. So LSU could be late to the party if they don't hurry there. It's why they need resolution from Kiffin soon. Kenny Dillingham is an easier hire. Now, he would have to leave his alma mater, but he's another one who's given the non-denial denial. He's a young guy in his early 30s who, with the right situation, would leave. And Blake Baker's a bit of a wild card here because Baker's on staff. He's targeted by many and thought by many to be a rising star and a future head coach. Would that be a guy you would elevate to get his first head coaching job? I don't know the answer to that. But those are three names worth considering as we move through this. Well, four if you include Drinkwitz, Sumrall, Dillingham, and Baker after Lane Kiffin, depending on how it all transpires. But however it all transpires, we'll be talking about it right here on Locked on LSU as the Lane Kiffin saga continues. So make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcast app. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and smash that like button and let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here on Locked on LSU, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network in the world. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day.